I'd had a couple
Hmm.
of brain scans, and they called me in to do more investigations because they told me that they'd found a clot deep in my brain. So there's never a right time to step back and take some time out. It needs to be baked in to how you run your business. But I think it is a hard lesson to learn. We're always putting it into the future. We're always kind of future casting our health in that there'll be time for that. We think there'll be time.
Hi, Heather McLellan. Thank you very much for coming for this podcast. It's very nice to having you. Could you
Thank
just
you.
share with us a little bit more about yourself, about what is it you do?
Yeah, so I work as a mentor for small business owners, what I call health in business mentor. And that is working with small business owners on the kind of working health lifespan. So, we tend to have a working life that may last from 16 or 18 all the way through into our late 60s, maybe longer for some. And during that time, it's inevitable that we come across some health issues. And my background is as a healthcare professional, working in occupational health and supporting people to return to work or stay in work after they've had an injury or illness. And in fact, over my whole career, I've realized that there's a gap for the self-employed business owner. And then I've also been and am now a self-employed business owner, and I've also encountered my own health problems in the last few years where I've had to apply all my professional knowledge to
Mhm.
myself and actually discover what it's really like to keep running a business when you've got a health condition. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that. So, what is the usual problem what people have when they run this small business, and what problems they can have with health, and how is that happened even?
Mm. Yeah, well, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you are somebody who is already running your business, you may have encountered various health problems already. And some of us choose to be self-employed because of a health problem, because it gives us ultimately more flexibility. But of course, the breadth of health problems is huge. But just to give you a flavour, I guess, of some of the things that are going on out there, we know that at least 36% of the UK population of working age have some kind of long-term condition. So that might be a joint problem, a respiratory lung problem, heart problem, or a mental health problem that will impact their ability to work at some point in their career. And then of that, you get into the nitty-gritty and we hear a lot about mental health at the moment, and that is very true. And actually, I was looking at some research the other day that 4 out of 5 small business owners struggle with their mental health at some point. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that. We've all been there in different stages.
Mm.
But then there's also people, with serious issues. So cancer, for instance, what I would call, diagnose serious health conditions. So cancer now, 1 in 2 people will get cancer at some point in their
Mhm.
life. So even if as a business owner you personally don't, there may be somebody very close to you that does. And it may be somebody close to you that means you want to step back and away from your business for a while. And that can be a very scary proposition in itself. And then you find yourself in this vicious cycle because of course you're trying to care for either your own health or somebody else's health, but then that brings with it the stress and anxiety of trying to keep a business running at the same time. So there's lots of reasons that people might come across, some kind of health issue, hopefully not caused by their business, but sometimes it is, of course.
Mhm. Mhm. Why do you think people tend to focus on one thing? For example, I want to run a business, I want to be successful, and they're just putting all the effort and all the time just into this one area when there is a saying like, when you are healthy, you have millions of wishes, but when you are sick, you have just one. So
Mm.
when people knows that, so why do you think it's like that? People just focus so much, and it doesn't need to be only business, it can be also an employee kind of mindset, like they
Yeah.
are just career.
I think, as humans, we want to get our heads down, and most of us want to be working. And but if you're setting up and running a business, you've got certain targets to be met, not least of all your own personal income. And sometimes or I think a lot of us take the attitude that, well, when I get to such and such a goal, then I'll take some time off. When I
Mhm.
get to such and such a goal, I can reduce my hours and I'll work less and I'll get to the gym more, or I'll take more time out for, meditation or relaxation. So we're
Mhm.
always putting it into the future. We're always kind of future casting our health in that there'll be time for that. We think there'll
Mhm.
be time for that. And sadly, that's not always the case. And if we keep putting it off and off, which of course is actually what then happens, there's never a good time. There's never a right time to step back and take some time out. It needs to be baked in to how you run your business. But I think it is a hard lesson to learn. And sometimes we have to hit up against a serious issue before we
Mm,
learn the lesson. But if we can come full circle on that and go, well, actually, if I am well and healthy and I am making time for the things that the other things outside of work that are important, then of course that will feed into having a more successful and sustainable business. Because I think that's also, it's about that long-term sustainability. It's all very well to say, well, I'll just do 3 months. I'll work
mm,
really hard for 6 months. I've got all these extra hours to do. Then I'll take
yeah,
some time off.
yeah.
It's holding ourselves accountable to that at the
Mm,
other end of it.
mm. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can say myself that I have experienced something like that, not in the extent of getting to some injury or big health issues. I'm lucky that I'm still young, so I didn't get to that point. But even now, I have it in my head. I can, for example, today I have a schedule like working from the office. I have a lot of phone calls to do, but I can just sit in my office, like in here, and I can just do it all day, and I don't need to take time off. And it's very easy to do.
Mm.
But I know if I don't take that time off and I'm not gonna go for my walk, I'll actually later on during that day, I'll be less productive. I'll actually do less things. So would you have any kind of advice of for people like if they are doing something similar to what I used to do? It's how kind of they can start changing that mindset that they'll actually having that health, having that more energy will actually help them to take this 1 hour off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you're already in the habit of working too hard, too long, too fast,
Mm-hmm.
I often kind of give an analogy of driving a car. You know, if you're pushing yourself too hard and too fast, it's entirely possible that you're going to crash at some point. It may come gradually. You may gradually feel the pressure build up, the stress build up, anxiety, you feel yourself becoming less productive, or it may happen suddenly. Something sudden may happen and totally wipe the floor for you, and you have to start again. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, you know, the biggest part of it, that there's lots of elements to looking after ourselves, which I'll come on to in a moment, but the biggest element of it for me personally, and because I've had to employ this myself, is becoming very intentional
Mm-hmm.
about every day reminding yourself that putting your health first and what you need to support your health and your energy levels, and therefore also your capacity to think creatively, be on the ball, you know, with clients and meetings and things like that, is dependent on you putting those foundations in place. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there are some core foundations, you know, good sleep, good
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, moving your body in some way, getting
Mm-hmm.
out in the morning daylight. Some of these things are fundamental, and the important thing is nearly all of them are free. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing costly
Yeah.
about making sure you get up and go for a walk in the mornings or
Mm-hmm.
spend some time thinking, meditating, praying, whatever it is that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I have to do it at the start of the day. Most of those
Mm-hmm.
things have to happen at the start of the day because then you've set yourself up for the success. You've got yourself focused, you've got yourself calm. I will often, you know, have a look at what's in my diary and think, well, what are the things that I really need to show up for today? How do I need to be? Am I ready for those things? And
Mm-hmm.
then I feel set for the day. So I have a dog. It helps because you have to
Yeah.
get out in the morning because
Yeah.
he has a silent nag. He stares at me until
Mm-hmm.
until we go, which you know we have a pretty set routine. But I think being intentional about choosing to put your health needs in your diary and put them in as non-negotiables in the same way you would as an appointment with a client,
Yeah.
that helps. It's not infallible, but it helps because you're saying this is as important in my business to
Yeah.
be looking after myself. And actually, the talk that I do, I talk about we are our biggest risk. We are our biggest liability. We insure ourselves against all sorts of other things. But if you are a sole business owner, if you're the person who delivers your services, if you go down, you know, nobody else is going to step in and run your business for you. And when
Mm-hmm.
you look at it like that, it's imperative that we do whatever we can to look after ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So could I ask you what happened to you? Yeah, like you mentioned that
Mm.
you had a while ago something happened with your health, and
Yeah,
what happened and how did you overcome that
yeah,
time?
yeah, sure. So it was back in, well, actually, I started feeling quite unwell in 2018, and as many people will relate to, I put it down to having a, you know, busy life. As a wife, a mum, I was running a business. I had a national rehabilitation business. So
Mhm.
my business helped support people who've been in serious accidents, had multiple fractures and things like that. And we had a whole load of physios around the whole country. And but I'd had quite a lot of other stuff going on. So there'd been a bereavement in my family. We'd moved house. We'd had some of these life events. You know, the life events you
Mhm.
hear rattled off.
Mhm.
There'd been some life events, and I was feeling pretty exhausted. And
Mhm.
it was coming up to Christmas, and we had a problem with our administration. Our administrators resigned out of the blue, and I came towards Christmas. I was just exhausted, and I started having, or I've progressively got more, and the phrase is burnt out. I was thinking, I'm burnt out. This is
Mhm.
stress, it's tiredness. I've got too much going on. If I can just get to Christmas, I'll have a rest. Um,
Yeah.
and I just felt really unwell. And it took several months after that, really. There was no big event. Took several months of me feeling a bit better, then not feeling so good, feeling a bit better, not feeling so good, eventually seeking some help. And it was in May 2019 that I got a call from my local hospital. I'd had a couple
Mhm.
of brain scans, and they called me in to do more investigations because they told me that they'd found a clot deep in my brain. So people probably heard of deep vein thrombosis in legs and maybe in lungs from, things like flying, but they'd found one in my brain. So
Mhm.
it was a type of stroke, and it was a total shock to me because I had still been functioning, albeit my function was dropping off and dropping off. My ability to I couldn't work the same hours. For instance, I was steadily reducing in how much I could do. I was steadily reducing in how much I felt productive and clarity about what I was trying to do, but trying to keep everything together. So that was a huge shock that something like that had been happening. And then it needed managing. So I was
Mhm.
put on all sorts of medication. They discovered the reason for it a few weeks later, which was a blood disorder, which I have for life. And again, some medication, which is an interesting scenario because it basically keeps me alive, but it's got some pretty nasty side effects. So
Mhm.
even getting the diagnosis, it wasn't all over. There's part of me that was going, well, okay, at least I know what was wrong. Now it's being treated. At least we can, get a handle on it. But actually, what happened is I continued to deteriorate as the drugs kicked in, and I had to get used to, modifying the way I was working and living. Um,
Mhm.
it actually became harder for a while, for a good while. And yeah, I had all these years of experience and knowledge about how to get other people back to work or support them to stay in work, but suddenly I was having to examine my own work, and I kept trying to shift it around. And I've always use the analogy of like a chessboard, you're constantly shifting your pieces around to just see if you can make it work a bit better
Yeah.
because you want to make this work for the long term. You need to make it work for the long term. And you look at
Mhm.
all the different options that you had, and you try to rearrange it. So that was kind of ongoing, and then we went into COVID. Uh, and I laugh because my business, we went into people's homes to do their rehabilitation in their homes, and then we couldn't. So then I was working through what I call a phased return to work plan, where you steadily build your hours back up. And I was
Mhm.
managing my workload really, really carefully and well, and my health. And then COVID arrived, which completely changed the way that we had to do business and caused obviously a lot of additional stress. So that's when it happened. Over the last 5 years now it's been, I have constantly been reevaluating trial and error, trial and error. What will this work? Will that work? Let's try this. Let's
Mhm.
try that. What works for me? Thinking, one moment you think you're managing it really, really well, the next minute you have a bit of a setback. I had another setback last spring. I broke my ankle last spring. So just when I'd kind of got a handle on everything else, I broke my ankle. I needed
Mhm.
surgery. I was still trying to run my business. So actually,
Mhm.
the big outcome was I decided to sell that business because I had
Mhm.
worked through all the ways I thought it was possible for me to keep running it and keep well because
Yeah.
I have no choice. I can't go back to the way it was before. I have to keep well for the future as well. I want to, want to and need to keep working. So when I had my leg in plaster, that really kind of brought it home that that business was not supporting my needs any longer.
Mm,
We were doing great things for clients, but it wasn't supporting my needs. So I
mm,
decided to sell it.
mm,
And over the last 12 months brings me to, to the point that we're having this conversation. I've set up a new venture using all
mhm,
my professional experience, bringing that personal experience and knowledge into it now, but creating a new business where it's smaller. It's about my bringing my expertise now to especially small business owners because there's very little support out there, especially
mhm,
for returning to work. And I was
mhm.
very fortunate that I've got a lot of great contacts in this field, and I was able to ring
Yeah.
friends, but it's not that easy. Um, yeah, so the kind of back end of last year, 2023, I set up this new business which is around mentoring other small business owners who are maybe going through something similar, either worried
Mhm,
about becoming unwell or
mhm.
something has happened. And I'm happy to give some examples that aren't me as well in a minute of
Yeah.
how, the different things that people have dealt with. And I am creating something. As I always talk about creating work that works for you. I am busy creating, still creating work that works for me, that I can
Mhm,
manage my health, walk my dog, get
mhm,
out locally and see people, but also look
mhm,
after myself. So,
mhm.
long-winded answer, but it's been a long journey.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for sharing. I mean, what you mentioned, it seems like with the business what you were running before, all these things which were happening to you is like sometimes it's difficult to let go. Like you sold the business, and it is difficult
Yeah,
to let go because obviously that was your business, and I don't know how long you had it, but
about
probably
10
your
years.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you obviously you enjoyed it and everything. But sometimes, like when we decide to stop something, something new open up. Like you have this new amazing business now where you are helping business owners to deal with their health. So, I mean, by doing that, I think what I can see, I mean, you can impact even more people because if you impact smaller business, that can impact all the employees in that business. So it's actually very impactful. So I'm
Thank you.
just thought about one of my things. It's not that nothing to do with health, but when we bought our first property we were like also as our baby it was like we bought it and I mean we didn't do the refurbishment manually, we did few things but we had the builders because we are not builders, but we wanted to keep that property, we wanted to refinance it but we've not been able. It was like three different brokers, solicitors, and no after no because like a first-time landlords. Also, I'm from Czech Republic, so this is also an issue with some mortgage lenders. So issue after issue, we were just paying money, paying, and I was trying for 2 years, almost 2 years to refinance, and I wasn't able. We wanted to keep it, and after we were like, no, it's time to sell it. We cannot get that property. It seems like it's not meant to be. And my wife, I remember, she was telling me like, these are all signs. It's not meant to be. Sell it. So we sold it, and it's just like kind of something like relief went, and I'm like, oh yes, and now we could focus on something different as well. But
Yeah.
sometimes when we are in it and we are like, oh, it's this is
Yeah.
what we do. We just don't want to let go, right?
And well, that part of it has been really interesting, because I did have to have, think long and hard about. I've invested a lot of time, energy, and money into that
Yeah.
business, 10 years from sort of beginning to when I sold it.
Mm,
And it is hard because one of the hardest things for me about it, had a very good business coach for several years who always used to say to me, I'm sure you may say similar to some of your clients, that your business is the vehicle for your life. It should be
mm,
serving you as well as
yeah.
serving your clients and customers. And every time I would look at that, is this business, fulfilling for me? Is it
Mm,
making the best use of my skills? And it was at the beginning, it always was. And so for me, you have a win-win scenario. As the business owner, you love what you're doing, and therefore you deliver great services, and that benefits your clients. And as time went by, I honestly thought that that business would take me through to my retirement. That was my
mhm,
plan. Build a business that I love, keep it, keep doing it as long as I want to do it. And I thought that that was me sorted, for the
yeah.
rest of my days. I didn't expect in my mid 40s to be facing a situation which was totally changing my health for the future and required me to look at whether that business still was the right vehicle for me. There was no
Mm,
doubt it was making a good and an impactful difference to the people that we served, and I hope for the people that worked for us too. We were having other people working for us and delivering great stuff too, but it was no longer the right thing for me. And realizing that you've outgrown or your needs are no longer being met by that business or work. If you're employed, it's the same situation. You may be in a
Mm.
in a job where you think this just isn't working for me anymore. You might love what you do, you might know that you're making a difference, but it just doesn't fit with your life circumstances. So
Yeah.
that was a hard letting go. But I was pleased I was able to pass over to another company who have
Hmm.
been able to continue delivering that. I've learned lots and lots in the process, and you go through that position of reframing it and saying, well, that was a step along a journey. I just thought it might be the thing I would do for the rest of my days, but clearly not. So yes, let's see what comes next. Open up
Hmm.
that space. I have to say that space, that's a very scary space to
Hmm.
go into, actually not really knowing, because I didn't really have a plan. I had some vague
Hmm.
ideas of what I wanted to do, but
Hmm.
I had no set plan other than to take 3 months out, which is what I did.
Hmm. Okay, I have actually two questions from
Mm,
that. So one is, if, for example, someone is listening and let's say they are running a business already for some years, like you did,
mm,
but maybe they don't feel fulfilled anymore. They are just running it because they want to still serve their clients or they are selling products, whatever they do, and it's bringing them some kind of income, but that is not the fulfillment. And let's say they are thinking of there is this option like, I would like to sell it,
mm.
but they don't know, they never sold the business. So how did you go about, like, how did you approach the company? How did you know how to sell it, the business, and
Yeah.
who helped you with that? Or is there any evaluation that you had somebody from
Yeah.
outside to evaluate? It's just somebody who's thinking about, like, if you could share maybe 3 steps what they could look
Mm.
into it.
Yeah, well, I knew nothing about it at all either beforehand. And actually, what I'd done is the previous 12 months before that, I had joined a group to learn about mergers and acquisitions,
Oh,
investing
okay.
in businesses.
Yeah.
And so I joined a group. It was a very small group at the time. It's grown considerably. I put a shout out there to Ross Tompkins, who you can find on LinkedIn. He was the mentor and
Hmm.
continues to mentor people along these lines. So I joined that group because I was looking at how could I actually grow the business in a
Yeah.
different way. Continuing to do what we do, but actually grow it by acquiring other businesses or merging with other businesses. So I was just learning completely new stuff, and I wasn't planning on selling, certainly at any immediate time. At that point,
Mm.
I was definitely on a growth plan. And then it was when I broke my ankle, I was like, okay, right. I think it's time. I think it's time that
Mm.
I sold this. And yeah, had it been 5 years previously or something, I simply probably would have walked away and I wouldn't have tried to sell it. But
Mm.
during this mentoring program, we were learning about all the things that fundamentally you needed if you wanted to sell a business.
Goodbye.
Now, I have to say, I didn't do it entirely properly because really I needed to spend another couple of years um, putting some more foundations in to
Into the
sell
business.
into my business before I
Yeah.
sold it. But because of my health was my priority. And I knew
Yeah.
that I didn't want to wait another 2 or 3 years. Now, some people may have that option. And if you're
Yeah.
definitely looking to maximize value and what you get for your business, then that's probably the way to go. But mine was, a different decision. But there may be people listening who are facing that. And
Yeah.
it was actually somebody else in the group. We'd got to know somebody
Mhm.
else with a healthcare company, and
Mhm.
it was actually that person that I went ahead and sold to.
Mhm.
So I think, for me, it was learning about that whole world as a whole,
Mhm.
investing in businesses, mergers and acquisitions, and then realizing that that gave me more options and that then you
Yeah.
can structure how you want that to look.
Mhm.
And I would say one of my big learning points, and I'm sure my colleague who bought the business would agree, we were both first timers, first time selling for me, first time buying for them. We
Mhm.
didn't probably go about it in quite the right way. My biggest recommendation would be to do it like a property, that you would have an exchange date, then a gap, and then a completion date. Um,
Mhm.
and you do all the handing over bit in the middle. We just had a
Yeah.
completion date and then we had a period of handover, had to give everything over in a very
Mhm.
short space of time because suddenly the
Mhm.
business didn't belong to us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was quite interesting. But
Mhm.
yeah, I learned a lot from
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
So try and summarize that. I think learn about mergers and acquisitions and exits. Speak to
Hmm.
some people. Yes, you may choose to get your business valued in the event I didn't need to, but there's
Hmm.
business brokers out there who can do that for you and support you through the
Hmm.
sales process. And then yeah, make sure you give yourself enough time to hand over whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And then actually the letting go after that was easier. And I guess there was an element of that that was I felt I was passing on a baton. I was
Hmm.
passing on the work that we'd done to another company that continued to do that. So that felt easier on the letting
Hmm.
go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting what you are saying because I'm actually also learning more about these things because we've been approached lately about one company that they wanted to buy us, our company. And I know that's going to happen in the future, but I thought when we'll be in a business like 5 years, 7 years, maybe in the future, but not after 2 years. I didn't expect somebody would want to buy us after 2 years. And they approached us and they were asking me all these sorts of questions, which I didn't have the answer for. And they were like, "Can you provide that?" And I'm like, "I have no idea. I don't have it." So, and after they kind of did a quick valuation based on what I shared with them, and I'm like, "Okay." And we had this idea, like maybe we could sell it, maybe we can focus on something different. At the end, we didn't sell it, but it gave me an idea. If the business is valued at that amount with that amount of properties what we manage, where we can get in, let's say, 5 years, because I already know the correlations. So that was very interesting to find out just because some people start asking. And now we are also looking in the businesses to start buying because, well, I mean, it's a very good way to, yeah, to make money and, skip the
Yeah.
startup
I think
business. Yeah.
yeah, I think if you're not in a position where you have to make a fast decision,
Yeah.
which I've really found myself at that point, but
Yeah.
at least I had done the prior learning, and I think probably the best way to go around it would be to plan further ahead to give you and be able to maximize the value that you can get for your return on your
Yeah.
business. But that's I hadn't thought about that at all when I started out with my business
Mm.
originally. It wasn't on my radar, so it was only as I was looking at different ways to grow the business that I started to see that. But actually, what I have seen in conversations I've had with clients this year is this thing where it's a bit like thinking about your health itself. We don't think about, well, what might we want to do in 5 years or 10 years? And
Yeah.
I know of various people who certainly reach maybe their 60s, early 60s, thinking that when they get there, they'll sell their business. But they get there, then they realize they've made no plans and
Yeah.
that it's
Yeah.
going to take a little while to get it all set up to sell it to get the best value.
Yeah.
So actually, that's another thing that people tend to leave really late, thinking I don't need to think about it yet. But if you start
Yeah.
learning about it now, then if something happens,
Yeah.
or if you need to retire, or find you can retire sooner than you
Yeah.
want and want to go off and do something completely different, you're ready.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely it just correlate together because I have one client and he's having a business for 25 years
Hmm.
and it's a very good business, but basically there is not that many systems in place. And
Yes.
now we are creating those systems. So maybe in the future there is an idea, it's an exit plan that he could sell it and he could sell it for good money. But we need to create those systems because
Yeah.
that bring that value. And after I have a clients which they are just starting in the business, they are like very like let's say they have a first deal and because I already know and I learned from my business, I'm like, now we need to start putting the systems in place now. When you have one deal, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't need it now. No, you need it now because
I
once you
think
do it
that
now,
that the systems is such a good point because so
mm,
I run this program as what I call health and business protection plan, and it's interesting because some people go, well, I don't need that. It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to. I didn't
yeah,
think it was going to happen to me. But one of the
yeah,
parts that we go over is, well, have you got your business set up in a way that you could step back? Does anybody else know how it runs? Have you taken the
yeah,
operational manual out of here and put it on paper? Even if you're a one man, one woman band, could someone else, could you direct them and say, in that filing cabinet over there, there's a cheat sheet on how my business runs, and I need somebody to go in and check the emails for me? Because if you
absolutely.
haven't got to that point of putting any systems in place and something happens to you or to a loved one and you need to step out of the equation. So I have a client at the moment actually who joined that program because her father became terminally ill last year,
Mm,
and she realized that she needed to step back, but she hadn't really set anything up to do that.
Mm.
And she did have a little team. So she
Yeah.
came on the program so that she could make sure now that she put some of those things in place. She had some, but not in a way that she knew that she could step back confidently and
Yeah.
leave it to run itself. So I think, those systems, um, it's having
Important.
some financial measures in place. It's having, what sometimes have a laugh. People say to me, "Oh, you're going to sell us health insurance or income protection?" I'm like, "No, I am not. They may be a good idea. You need to look into them, but you need to self-insure.
Mm.
You need to look at your whole picture, your whole family needs, your plans for the future. Um, we could, send work to financial advisors this way, but you also need the systems. And one of the things that did work quite well for me, I had been as a business, my little team at the time before I was ill, we'd been following the Clockwork book by Mike McCallowich, and
Hmm.
therefore we'd been steadily working on delegating some of the
Hmm.
duties to other people in the team. So there did come a point when I was unwell where I had to stop.
Hmm.
It took me 3 days to delegate. I was struggling with deciding to stop. And I think that's really interesting. People often struggle to know if they're feeling unwell, well, at what point do I give up and I actually stop and take some time out? Well, I took some time out because a medical consultant finally told me that I should, and I needed permission, which is a whole
Hmm.
other interesting situation. But it meant that once I made the decision that I was going to take time off, it took me 3 days to delegate all the work because the
Hmm.
little team that I had, we had already been working on, well, who can learn about that? Who can learn about this? Have we got all the systems in place? Can the thing run without Heather being there?
Hmm.
It could, and it did,
Hmm.
for a while. Not for
Yeah.
many weeks, but it did. I'm not saying we had it all correct, but yeah, the systems is important for, the value and the selling of the business in the future. So it's not dependent on the owner, but it's
Yeah.
also important for health. If you want to step back or take 3 months out or whatever it is you want to do, you need the
Yeah.
system so that it can run without you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Mm.
remember when I've been on one business event, it was 3 years ago, I think. And the first thing what we were learning was when you start the business, you need to think of how quickly you can fire yourself. So it
Yeah,
was like
yeah,
was a
that's a
big,
great way to
big
look at it.
thinking, like yeah, how quickly you can fire yourself. So you are not needed in that business, and then you have a business. And just based on the health, when we are saying like we need the systems for the business, also when thinking like you mentioned, is it important to do those daily things for your health in order to it's gonna be sustainable and we can work on that business. And I just recently read the book which is called Dirty Girl. It's about it's about health.
Yeah,
It's about toxins, health. It's about health and toxins in our body and how to detox ourselves and things like that. And why I'm sharing that is because there is one sentence which I really like. It's you either pay a small bill now or a big bill later, and it's up
yeah,
to you. Like some people, they are just going for the money, 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 and after they run out of the health, and after they need to start paying a big bill for the health because not only they will need all sorts of pills or whatever support, but also they're not gonna they
yeah.
working. So yeah, so it's really nice. Yeah, I
There's a
was
similar there's a similar quote to that which says if you don't make time for your wellness, you will end up making time for your illness.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's hugely inconvenient when it
Mm.
happens out of the blue. And I think there's that phrase of, well, living on borrowed time. If you are pushing yourself and you know you're tired and you know you're exhausted and you know you're stressed and you know you're not looking after yourself, there's probably only so long you're going to get away with that. And it
Yeah.
may present itself in a whole raft of different ways, and it's different for everybody. I'm a huge believer in, our behaviors and our beliefs do have an impact on our health.
Mm.
And, hindsight is great. I can look back and look at all the factors that led up to me becoming ill, and business
Mm.
was one part of it. It wasn't the whole of it, but it was one part of it. And the thing is, when we look back on it after the event, it's too late to change some of those things.
Yeah.
But before it happens to us, it's difficult to see the relevance and the
Yeah.
urgency of making those changes. And I think if as a business community we can make it acceptable and um, clear that there is a link between looking after yourself,
Mm.
your well-being in every sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
having a long-term sustainable and fulfilling business, then
Mm.
then that's the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you mentioned before about the selling like a health insurance. I used to do that back in Czech Republic.
Yeah.
And when I was going to visit my friends, I mean, obviously I was young, I was having a young client, some of them, and they would tell me, yeah, but I'm healthy. I don't need that health insurance. I was like, that's exactly what you need it. Because once you are sick, nobody will give it to you.
You won't be able to
So
get it.
yeah, unless you have lots of money, and when something happens and you are covered with all your money, that's good. But unless you are that rich, you need the health insurance for
Yeah,
yourself.
and you know
Uh,
that's been a really interesting experience for
and it's
me.
cheap when you are young and healthy.
It's
It's
cheaper
cheap,
when
yeah.
you're younger, and if you've got a good, income coming in that you can base it on, all those things, and you'll know better if you've sold it in the past. But
Yeah.
that's been a really interesting point of discussion with many of my clients, and it's been an interesting thing for me because some of the clients that I've worked with as a healthcare professional have insurance that pays for their
Hmm.
service and rehabilitation. And there's a huge gap if somebody isn't insured in what they can access and what they can't
Hmm.
access, even in the UK. We're very fortunate with our healthcare systems, but the NHS cannot provide some of this support that you might need, especially
Hmm.
around. So, return to work after illness or injury in the professional world is called vocational rehabilitation. A bit of a mouthful.
Hmm.
But it's
Okay.
not actually that easy to access. It's not
Hmm.
available. I mean, I discovered that I couldn't access it through the neurology department. I didn't qualify. I couldn't
Hmm.
access it through the hematology department
Hmm.
because they just don't have that sort of thing. So, looking at something like income protection insurance, and I'm a sit on the fence kind of person. I think it's a good idea, but there's also a hell of a lot of room for interpretation, and it doesn't work for everybody, and you've got to be sick in the right way at the right time.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you have an income protection insurance policy and you are self-employed and you break your ankle and you know that you've got to take 3 months off work because you drive for you've got to drive your business or you're active and you're just not going to be able to physically do it. If you want to claim on your income protection policy, you need to stop all work. Stop.
Hmm.
Don't even
Yeah.
get on your laptop.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
need to get a sick note from your GP to prove to the insurance company that you're not working at all. If
Yeah.
you don't get a sick note and you just say, well, I haven't been able to work because I've got my leg in plaster, they'll be like, yeah, but we've got no evidence that you've not been able
Yeah.
to work. So you need the sick note and you need to be prepared to stop everything. Now, that probably is not that easy for a business owner
Hmm.
because most business owners that I know are proactive.
Hmm.
Um, what's the other word that I was thinking of? You're take responsibility for your business and you'll be trying to do whatever you can. Now, the
Yeah.
problem is that means you may well be working 10 hours a week just answering emails and taking phone calls,
Hmm.
but you're still working. So, yeah, it's a really nuanced situation if you're
Hmm.
self-employed and needs to be discussed kind of thoroughly with financial advisors and the like to understand how and when you can claim on it. Because then you might arrive at this point thinking, well, it's all right. I've got my health insurance and I've got income protection insurance, and then find it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting place to be in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I know a lot of sometimes people they would climb in the past and they wouldn't get a climb or something like that. But I don't know how it is in here in UK. I just have my only insurance is like if I die. I don't care about any others. But yeah, I have a question. I mean, we are running out on time, but uh, it would be interesting to know when you've been in that transition when you sold that business and after you had the time off, and you said that was the transition when you are going to a place where you didn't know where you are going. So how did you find out what will be the next chapter, or is there anybody helped you? How was that for you?
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting. It has been difficult because, and I'm sure there's business owners and people who are employed who can relate to this, who kind of desperate want to just say, do you know, I'd love to take 3 months off. And then you get to that 3 months and you spend the first 6 weeks recovering, sleeping.
Yeah.
Um, But there comes a point when you're looking into the future. If you've not got anything lined up, and some people may not. I purposely chose that because I knew I needed to stop.
Mhm.
I needed to stop and allow myself that time. But yeah, not knowing. at all what the future was actually going to look like was difficult. I wanted it to be open so that, as you said earlier, I could allow other potential new things to come in that wouldn't have been available if I hadn't have allowed that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the processes that I used, the first few weeks, I literally just didn't think about it. I was just like, I just need to not think about it and see what may come up naturally that way. So some things came up naturally, like I already knew that I wanted to do more of this kind of mentoring with people and
Mm-hmm.
with small business owners. With the experience that I'd had, it had confirmed what I already knew, that there was very little support for small business owners. And that now with this additional experience, hopefully I could, bring more and offer more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but actually, one of the exercises that I do and I've done with clients and the people that have helped me, fellow health professionals in this sector and friends who know me well and have known me a long time, it is literally, getting a blank sheet of paper and writing down all the skills that you have,
Mm-hmm.
all the things that you could do, and all the ways in which you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there is a real transition as well when you have been ill or injured like that. Depending on which way it is, it can flow both ways. So it might be you've been employed and you decide you want to leave a business, leave being employed and become self-employed. So there's that journey. But there's also someone, if you've had a business, that you may be thinking of going back the other way because you've learned all the pitfalls of being self-employed when you're ill. There's no sick leave. There's
Yeah.
no support.
Yeah.
There's no support to do what we call this phased return to work. So there might be someone thinking, I've sold my business and I think I should go and get a job. And I've been through that. I've been thinking, well, should I go and get some part-time employed work and looking literally, the pros and cons of all those different aspects and rolling those around, almost modeling them in your mind. Well, how would that
Mm-hmm.
feel? How would that look? What would the reality be? So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, the reality would be I'd have to add an hour's commute to each end of my day, and I'd have to be at a workplace from 8:30 till 4:30. So actually, then we've got a 10 or 11-hour day. And if you've got a long-term condition like mine, a 10 or 11-hour day every day, or even 3 or 4 days a week, is
Mm-hmm.
not sustainable. So again, it's been what feels to me a slow process because I've been looking for what's sustainable. I can
Yeah.
do something like that and try it and say, well, let's see how I get on. But I kind of know now, I know now I'm looking after my own needs better. That's not sustainable for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's coming up with these little ideas of, well, what would that look like? What would that feel like? And what would this look like?
Mm-hmm.
What would that feel like? And playing around, playing around with
Mm-hmm.
it and creating a picture. But the beauty is if you start with nothing, you can create whatever you want within
Yeah.
reason. Obviously, I mean, you need to have the skills. Um, you need to have something to offer. But yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's worth doing if
Mm-hmm.
because it's a point in your life where you've got a stop moment and go, if I could choose to do things differently, what would that look like? And it is a bit of one of those pivotal moments in when you have. I was very fortunate. I did not come close to death,
Mm-hmm.
but I came close enough to know that it could have been an awful lot worse, an awful
Yeah.
lot. And then you see your life going forward in a different way, and you say, well, if I was going to do something that's going to keep me healthy, keep me occupied, fulfilled, that's helping in my case, helping other people to benefit
Mm-hmm.
from something, learn something, then what would that really look like? There's,
Mm-hmm.
there's quite a lot of holding your nerve to be done. But yeah, list out everything you can do, model out in your mind how different scenarios would look, and then at some point you've got to take the leap and start doing something. Even if you start doing little bits of this and little bits of that to test it. And again, from a vocational, the theoretical point of view, we talk about having work trials. So set something up that's a little bit like a trial. Well, how would it be if I tried this? How would that work? And
Yeah.
not being afraid to mess around with your daily routine, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're always used to do your exercise in the evening, well, try doing it at 9 in the morning and shift your timetable and see if that works better for you. So there's lots of ways you can adjust your working day especially if you run your own business. That is one of the beauties of it. You've got this ultimate flexibility. It's your business.
Mm.
You choose what days, what hours, all
Yeah,
those sorts of things, where you do it. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, remembering that that's one of the benefits that we can do is basically build something from scratch that works for us. And I think back to my little mantra of creating work that works for you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, having a business definitely, like you mentioned, a very good flexibility, but also a big enemy for people, especially when there's this transition from being an employee to start running a business. Because
Yeah.
I remember, like, I decided to do it full time, and Monday, Tuesday, I've done what I thought I need to do, and after I'm like, what now? I didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't know what to do. And I can see a lot of people like that. They kind of they don't know what to do when they are like what all the aspects they should be doing in order to create that business. So there needs to be some structure and all these things. But I'll
Yeah.
have a last question for you because
Mm.
we are already will be 11 soon. Is if you can think of either this business what you are in now or what you've been in before, can you think of one business breakthrough which helped you or was something like, oh, wow,
Mm.
can be anything.
There's been a lot over the years. I think the main thing for me, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about letting go of
Hmm.
that business. It would be easy to say that, that didn't end up quite where I envisaged it would go eventually. And I spent, as I said, a lot of time, a lot of money,
Hmm.
energy creating something there and
Hmm.
building it. And there's some level of disappointment around the fact that it didn't go all the way through for me.
Hmm.
But allowing myself to look back at that and go, well, every single thing that I learned there was a stepping stone. So there wasn't one pivotal thing other than realizing that everything I've learned in that business, I bring forward with me into whatever I do next. All the
Hmm.
good bits, all the difficult bits, and there are difficult bits, making sure you get paid on time. There's all these simple little things that actually add up. So I think remembering that everything you do, whether it appears to you or to others to be a success or not, is learning. And think about everything you do is an opportunity to learn and bring forward into what you do next and see it as an evolution, rather than something that didn't work. It's an evolution and you've learned from it. So all the while I'm learning and thinking, okay, how could that have been different? How can I make the most of that opportunity? What does this scenario that I didn't particularly want, what opportunities does that give me? So yeah,
Hmm.
that's not like one big moment, but I think the moment where you think, am I letting something go? Yes, but actually, essentially, I've learned so much more.
Hmm. Hmm. Amazing. Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing, and thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for all the interview, all the knowledge and wisdom you shared with us today. I really
Thank you.
enjoyed it. I love speaking about business and health. It's it's
It's
very
been
good.
really great. Thank you. Thank you for your great
So
questions.
yeah, thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah.